Hello everyone, and welcome back to another R tutorial video. In this video, we're going to pick up where we left off talking about indexing data frames. So if you remember in the previous video, we covered the two different approaches to getting individual values. You could either specify the row number and the column number, or you could specify the column name and then the row number. And that was really great if you just wanted to get a single value out. But what if you want multiple values? What if you want an entire column or an entire row or multiple rows and multiple columns? Right? That's sometimes called subsetting, right? What if you wanted to subset the data frame? Well, the approach is actually going to look very similar. So what we're going to do, as always, is I want to start with a clean copy of my data frame here. A clean copy of the iris data frame. So we've got our iris data frame. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by trying to pull out an entire row. Right, let's say that you wanted to pull out the entire fourth row of the iris data set. So because we can grab that with head, let's go ahead and just quickly take a peek. And we want to pull out that entire fourth row here, this fourth row. So how do we go about doing that? Well, we know from we'll call it R for row. We know from the indexing of individual values that the way this should work is the name of the data set, right? The brackets to show that we're indexing that data frame. And then we said that you always have the row number and the column number. So if we want an entire row, what we're going to do is we're going to specify the row number that we want. So in this case, we said we wanted the fourth row. And then the column number, we're actually going to leave that blank. So if you don't put anything, you have to have the comma. I should specify. You have to have this comma here. If you have the comma, but then you leave the column number blank, what R will do is it will interpret that as grab everything. So what this is doing right here is it is saying go into the iris dataset, grab the fourth row, and then because we didn't specify anything, grab all the columns. And so if we run that, and then we display that in the console here, you'll see that we've grabbed the fourth row, and you'll see that these values match up with what we saw when we displayed the header earlier. So that's how you get the entire row. Well, let's imagine that instead we wanted the entire column, right? An entire column. How would we do that? I'm going to use COLL here so that we don't have some weird issue with reserved namespaces. So we're going to call this call. And again, we're going to start by naming the data set that we want. And then we're going to, in here, as always, have the row number and the column number. All right, this comma here is extremely important. So because we want all the rows, right, we're going to leave this row number blank. And then for the column number, we're going to specify what column we want. And why don't we do something a little bit different? Why don't we grab species? So that's column number 5. So what this is going to do is it's going to go into the iris dataset. Because we left this blank, it's going to grab all of the rows. And then it's going to grab only column 5. So it's going to grab all the rows of column 5. And if we run this, and then we print it, you'll see that we get 150 names: Setosa, Versicolor, and Virginica. And again, this is an iris dataset, so these are different species of iris. So that's how we would get an entire column. So let's assume that instead of an entire row or an entire column, we wanted to mix and match. We wanted some rows, some columns, right? We wanted to truly subset the data frame. Right. So we're going to call this iris underscore sub, and I'm going to put a one under there just so we can do multiple examples of this. All right, so if we wanted to subset the rows and subset the columns, well, how would we do that? So as always, you're going to start with the name of the data frame that you want to subset. And then this is the part where we're going to introduce something a little bit new. So we need that comma, right? You always need the comma. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we want the rows 5 through 10. And we want columns 3 and 5. So the way this is going to work is, because we don't want just one row and we don't want all the rows, we have to tell R, okay, well, which rows do we want? And the way this is accomplished, because we want more than one, is with this C here and open and close parentheses. So what this C does is it says, okay, do everything inside of here first. And so because we want 5 through 10, we can do 5 colon 10. So what this is going to say is it's going to say, okay, go into the iris dataset and grab me everything in rows 5 through 10, because that colon is essentially saying do everything 5 through 10. Right. So in the columns, right, we wanted columns 3 and 5. That's going to look somewhat similar with the C, but instead of the colon, right, we're going to do 3, comma 5. Right, we don't want the fourth one, so we can't use the colon. So what this is going to say is this is going to say, go into the iris dataset, grab me rows 5 through 10, columns 3 and 5. And if we run this, and then we print it, actually first let's do the dim. I think this is a good time to re-talk about dim again. So what dim is going to do is it's going to give us the dimension. So if we did this right, it should be rows 5 through 10, which should be 6 rows, and it should be 2 columns, right? Because it's row 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, right? Because it includes both ends. So we can see that our dimensions match what we expected. And if we print out iris sub 1, you'll see that we do indeed get the petal length, which was column 3, and the species, which was column 5, and you'll see that we grabbed 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So that's one example. I really want to go through another example because this is really sort of the meat and potatoes of dealing with data frames, is how we pull information out. So let's go through another example. Let's call this iris sub 2. Again, we're going to index the iris data frame, and you always have to have that comma there. So what do we want to pull out? Well, let's just go through another example. In this case, let's say that we don't want the rows 5 through 10. Let's say we want the even rows 2 through 10. There's some complicated ways that we could have it automatically generate even numbers, but we're not going to do that. We're going to assume that the data set's small enough that we can do something like 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. And then we want the odd columns. So this would be columns 1, 3, and 5. Right, so what this is going to do is this is going to say, let's go into the iris data set and let's grab rows 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 from columns 1, 3, and 5. So if we run this, right, we're going to dim again just to make sure that it did what we think it did. So if we did this correctly, we should get a 5 by 3 data frame, which we do. And then just to make sure that it worked the way we think it did, just print it out. And you'll see we have sepal length, petal length, and species, and we have rows 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Okay, so that's going to be it for this video. If any of this seemed confusing, I highly encourage you to go back, rewatch the parts you're confused about, and as always, please reach out. Thank you.